G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं। वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर का रोड मैप सुखद हो।
सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास का मंत्र हम सभी के लिए एक पथ प्रदर्शक बन सकता है।
India did best to send across a message of unity and peace.
G20 to serve unity and peace.
G20 is a G20 that is exceptionally very well organized.
The West.
The summit has given us a clear guiding star to follow.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this very special edition of The Right Stand as we continue our G20 special coverage. Ladies and gentlemen, our graphics team has done a fantastic job trying to recreate the G20 right up around here in our fantastic studio. But nothing beats this. And you have to give it to the makers, give it to the government, give it to those who've put in their heart and soul and tireless hours of work in trying to build this beautiful, fantastic Bharat Mandapam. And that's a fantastic 28 feet Nataraja, made of Ashtadhatu, that adorns right at the entrance. What a sight this is, and this has been witness to landmark, ladies and gentlemen. It's from the time India assumed the chair of the G20 over the course of the last year. Yes, the chair, our presidency continues another 2.5 months until November. But this is the man whom the world is now crediting for not just acting or making Bharat the Vishwamitra, but giving the Vishwa Mantra also. The mantra of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas and Sabka Prayas, taking it to the world, saying we can learn from it and we can imbibe and we can do. Let's include everybody. Let's make it human-centric and let's make it for the benefit of all. These are the visuals of the Prime Minister towards just a short while ago, making his way to that media center where I was there last evening along with our entire team covering the waiting media. Lots of cheer. We see the News 18 crew, members of the News 18 team all over, along with our friends from across the media platforms, international media there, and everybody shouts and chants of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and of course PM saying Dhanyavad to everybody. Let's try and amp up the audio NATAB if we can, because the PM time and again saying thank you to the media.
मोदी जी के
Into the media center to loud cheer.
Excellent.
And that was Prime Minister Narendra Modi saying Dhanyavad to everybody. Let us say Namaste and Dhanyavad to one more person who is the G20 Sherpa, who shepherded the big New Delhi declaration. Amitabh Kant ji, Namaste, Dhanyavad and congratulations. Is it now sinking in that you've achieved what was seemingly looking like impossible even on the night before the day of the summit?
Well, it was difficult. It was very, very tricky. But I think as a team, we've managed it, and it's been largely possible because of India's great stature today, and because of the Prime Minister's own, his credibility in a democracy being very high. And I think I work as the Sherpa to the Prime Minister. So because his stature was high, I could take many risks. I could bulldoze a little bit, and I could get everybody together. The emerging markets got together, and we had good negotiators. And I think we really pushed hard because Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa and India, all of us, when we get together, we bring a lot of power. And then I realized that as we went along, Saudi, Turkey, Argentina, Mexico all joined us to say that we will not allow G20 to be wrecked. It will not be a divided house. It will be a voice of consensus. And that brought everybody together. We had many challenges while we were negotiating. And in the final stages, I think it went up about minimum 15 times, up and down, up and down, up and down. But I think we were just fortunate to have clinched it. So I think it was, to my mind, I give a lot of credit to this because of the elevated stature of India, and also because I was working as really the Sherpa of the Prime Minister. His personal credibility was very high and I could pull it off.
Amitabh ji, Dr. Shashi Tharoor has been quite lavish in his praise for you on Twitter. He said the Foreign Service's loss is the IS's gain, and that he hinted that even the night before it was not ready, but it eventually was. Is that true, if I may ask?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, we got into the final round of negotiation at about 11:30. Next day morning was the leaders' conference. And there was just no time, but we took it to brinkmanship. But important thing is that it's not about IAS or Foreign Service. We are all working for the country, and we are all working essentially to ensure that India wins. And I had a team of very good officers. Yes. I had Nagaraj Naidu, I had Enam who worked with me, and they were all. Nagaraj is a top class. His drafting ability is world class. Enam's ability in terms of sheer enthusiasm and positivity is top class. And then I had sitting right and left to me the Brazilian Sherpa, who's a renowned diplomat, and I had Zain, who's the South African Sherpa. His skills on international law are truly outstanding. So all of us, and then I brought in Jani, who's the Indonesian Sherpa. All of us work together as a team. And eventually, it's not just the Prime Minister. It's not just the Indian Prime Minister, but it's all four Prime Ministers, their stature counted. So Prime Minister led from the front, and then we had the courage to say that this G20 must be a G20 of consensus. That's what the Prime Minister had told us. And therefore, we made it a full G20 of consensus. It's also a big win for multilateralism. It's a big win for the developing countries. This is a document that has been produced as a voice of the global South and the developing countries. It's loud and clear on that count. And it's really a voice for growth and progress. And it's a call for peace in many ways.
The Sabka Saath was supposed to be a mantra for the people of Bharat. It now seems to have become a Vishwa mantra.
Yeah, so India has truly acted, as the Prime Minister said, as the Vishwa Mitra in this, by bringing everybody together. I don't think there's any other country in the world today other than India where his leader is able to bring, the Prime Minister is able to bring the emerging markets. The Prime Minister is able to bring the developed countries. The Prime Minister is able to bring Russia and China all together on the same table and arrive at a consensus. I don't think, even not merely climate, not merely energy, but also on critical issues of Russia, Ukraine, we've managed to bring everybody together.
Those contentious passages, those paragraphs, how did that come to be? Because you've called it a Ukraine war, contrary to what positions maintained by Russia and China. But you've underlined the nation's positions and deterred from naming Russia and China explicitly.
So let me first say that there were a lot of contentious issues on climate and energy which went on till the end. And, those are very, very important issues. And the leaders have actually come out with a Green Development Pact, and it's a very powerful pact because not only does it have action in terms of tripling renewable energy, on cutting down on fossil subsidies, but it has a very big ambition on life, the lifestyle for environment. And because that was important for us to push through, and then it has Global Biofuel Alliance,
yes,
many other components, ending plastics. and so on. Actually, one of the key highlights of the leaders' document is the Green Development Pact, which very few people are talking about, but it's very important to put it. Then energy, and later, towards the end, it was last 5 days we had locked ourselves about 50 kilometers away from Delhi. It was very important that whatever we do does not get leaked out to the media and the press, because we were coming out with different versions of the geopolitical draft.
Yes.
It was the key to that was to keep everybody locked up and ensure that nothing comes out in the media. And because any leakage of information would have wrecked the whole effort.
Correct.
So we didn't allow the draft to go out. And in fact, all Sherpas who used to come into the negotiating room had to keep their mobiles out. Nobody could get in with a mobile. No pictures were allowed. And that's how we started the drafting session. So India spelled out the principles on which others added, and then we went along and we brought consensus through different drafts. There were several versions of it, several rounds of non-stop negotiations, but at the end of it, let me tell you, that's a long story of falling apart, coming down. But the end of it, let me tell you, the clinching fact was that it was the stature of the Prime Minister. It was his elevated position where we took the risk, because what I am is really the Sherpa to the Prime Minister.
Yes.
And I had to take certain risks because I knew that he has a big stature. His personality in the international arena is strong, and I could take this level of risk, and I could push through, and I could, with vigor and energy, and my body language and all, was confident because of my leader. And that enabled, I think in the end, it was just my ability to reflect the stature of my Prime Minister which enabled it.
No, and it's been done phenomenally, because I've read through the entire 80-odd paragraphs, and each and every domain, there seems to be significant progress compared to Bali, Amitabh ji. And in one interesting part is the economic corridor. Italy now has hinted to China that they're trying to pull out of Belt and Road, and because they're part of this economic corridor. That's a big strategic win, sir.
Yeah. So, Anand, what India has done is a win for multilateralism. It's a win for developing countries. It's a win for emerging markets. It's a win for the global south. And it's a win for consensus politics. And it's a win for peace. It's a clarion call for peace in the world today. And what the document really states very clearly is that growth and development have to be paramount for emerging markets. And this is really the key to this document.
But let me ask you, sir, in terms of taking the document aspect forward, you highlighted 5 bullet points which are the salient features of the New Delhi Declaration. Points number 4 and 5 were about reinvigorating multilateralism and multilateral institutions for the 21st century. And the Prime Minister has backed it with a clear message about wanting to revamp the UNSC.
Well, we've had a whole para, and it took a long time to draft it out, but we've had a full para on reforms in the United Nations. And then, of course, we've talked about bigger, and more effective multilateral financial institutions, which was very important for us. And from an emerging market viewpoint, we fought everyone. We fought the G7, we fought everyone together to get that terminology right and to enhance lending capacity. So I think both the UN reforms figure, the multilateral financial institutions figure, and I think the world has sent out, the G20 has demonstrated that it has a much more stronger voice on issues of geopolitics, on issues of development, on the issues of growth than the United Nations Security Council. India has demonstrated that.
To get crypto, financial terrorism and money laundering, get those paragraphs in, how tough or easy was that? Or would you see that as a big achievement?
Yeah, that was tough because, at the terrorism discussion, because we were bringing in issues of ensuring that there are no safe havens, etc. There should be, we wanted a very, very strong para on terrorism.
Yes.
That took a lot of effort. It took a lot of effort because G20 has many countries. It's important that we bring everybody along, and everyone has a veto power. So to get everybody together and say that we are all against terrorism, we are not going to give a safe haven to terrorists, was a very important point. It's all criminal and unjustifiable. That was very, very important in what the message that we were sending out. It's a very strong para if you read it.
But how was it? Was it easy or difficult to bring China on board? Because sociologist Salvatore Babones, after reading the paragraphs on terror, says China has literally thrown Pakistan under the bus here. Would you want to concur?
So let me on this say that China is a multilateral player, and we had several challenges from China on many issues. On this multilateral negotiation on life, women-led development, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. But towards the end, our negotiating team, all of us, had built up very good relationship with the Chinese Sherpa team. And it was a one-to-one personal relationship which enabled us to convince them that this is the time for emerging markets and for developing countries to get together. If we do not support Indonesia, which we did last year, if you do not support us now, and if we together do not support Brazil next year and South Africa later, we'll be wrecking G20. G20 is very distinct from G7. The voice of developing countries must be heard, and that China realized. And China then realized that it must remove all the brackets on all this because it must help the developing countries. And that's where we succeeded. So it was more on a personal level.
How many of them are ready to play a round of 9 holes or 18 holes with you now, sir?
Well, I think I'll go and play 18 holes now. I'll be quite relaxed. I want a good sleep and then go and play 18 holes. But it's been tough. It's been tough. It's been this thing. But we always get inspired by Prime Minister's own tremendous energy and his dynamism, and therefore it's inspiring in many ways. And he leaves a huge task for us to build a G20 of consensus. In short, he told us that it has to be very action-oriented. He told us that it will have to be decisive and ambitious and inclusive. We've tried to deliver on all his vision. Really, it was he's really the leader of G20 during India's presidency. We are all acting as his Sherpa. So that was the vision we are trying to fulfill. And now we'll have to get into a virtual G20 for November. So we'll have to start work all over again. He's given us tough tasks again.
Well, tell us, that was my final question. How easy or difficult was it to bring the Africa Union on board, get everybody in the course of just 1 year? Because this discussion was at the end of Bali. That was what was revealed and the promise was revealed. So that's the final question, sir. Taking it forward into the virtual session at G20, what's on agenda?
So I think the African Union made a lot of, it's a historic win for everyone, particularly for the global South and for India. But the Prime Minister's letter to the leaders of all G20 countries made a huge difference. And I think we got a lot of overwhelming support because of Prime Minister clearly stating that this is a must during our presidency, and it got overwhelming support. Once it had got support, we argued it out at the Sherpa level. Our job was then to bring consensus. There were some challenges, but I think we've been able to manage other countries. We've got full support from everyone. I must say that all countries supported us on making AU a permanent member. Overwhelming support from every single country, every single region.
New Delhi declaration हो गया, तो नवंबर का brief क्या है, sir?
नवंबर का ब्रीफ ये है कि साहब अभी अब काम शुरू कीजिए इसको डिलीवर करने के लिए। जो अभी हम लोगों ने डिक्लेरेशन बनाया है, इसको ग्रास रूट पर इम्प्लीमेंट करिए। तो अगले 3 महीने तो हमको इम्प्लीमेंट करवाना पड़ेगा, और फिर वो उसका क्या आउटकम हुआ है तो वो उस आउटकम के बारे में बताना पड़ेगा। तो अभी तो सांस लेने का समय नहीं मिलेगा, अब तो और मुश्किल में फंस गए।
Well, that's how Prime Minister is, isn't it? You don't rest. You've
Yeah.
finished one,
Yeah.
you move on to the next milestone.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Amitabh Kantji. Congratulations to you and to the entire team. Great work done, and I think phenomenal outcomes. 112 plus outcomes, which is again a record that you've tweeted and we've spoken about too. Thank you very much, and congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Namaste. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been phenomenal, and there's a reason why Vishwamitra has also become Vishwa Mantra, that is, has provided the Vishwa Mantra of Sabka Saath. This whole aspect of illusion is something the Prime Minister has been able to work. Look at what's been achieved. Let's try and first understand the Africa Union. 55 nations become permanent member, and it's all happened, the process happened in just 1 year. So from India's chair, this entire continent has now been connected with the entire G20 grouping. It becomes G21, literally 19 nations plus EU plus AU. 100% consensus on geopolitical issues. Not a single paragraph of the 38-page long New Delhi declaration had a footnote or an objection. It's been totally agreed on. Consensus on wording of the Ukraine war passage. Biofuel alliance that was mooted by Brazil. So you got Brazil, the US. We also have nations like Bangladesh. 19 nations already are signatories for the World Biofuel Alliance. There'll be more coming on board very, very soon. Prime Minister Narendra Modi getting Joe Biden and, of course, MBS, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to shake hands. So that ice has been broken. And that was a significant moment. The selfie moment between Joe Biden and Sheikh Hasina, that also because Bangladesh equations with the US, especially the Biden administration, been very, very frosty, and that's seen a thaw. The economic corridor and the Trans-Africa Highway. So it's not just India all the way to Europe that's going to be linked via Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and the UAE, but you're also going to have a Trans-Africa Highway which is going to be built, and at zero cost to India. Economic corridor, Italy to exit the BRI. So clearly this BRI, Italy is going to exit and join this routing and this combination. Big significant achievement. Japan then comes out and says, we are not already helping India. We want to help build this infrastructure, and we want to say in it too. We want to get on board. Detailed paragraphs and also definition of terror. Clearly, if you read, Professor Salvatore Babuno is saying China has literally thrown Pakistan under the bus in the way it's been worded. So many, many achievements. Let's go straight across to our guest this evening. Professor Brahma Chelani is with us, strategic affairs expert. Ambassador Kamal Sibal is with us, and Andrew K.P. Leung also with us. Good evening. Thank you very, very much. Ambassador Kamal Sibal, how would you see, have you perused the New Delhi declaration? And if you look back over the last 48 hours, how would you rate India's presidency, sir?
I think Amitabh Kant has already given you all that needed to be said about how we handled the G20 presidency and the results that we have succeeded in achieving. So there is nothing more that one can add to what has been said by someone who actually was in the forefront of negotiations and in contact with all the parties concerned in building up consensus. Having said that, I think it is very clear that I'll just mention that the West, led by the United States, decided to become softer in their position on the Ukraine issue because they realized that if they did not, then it would be possible to get a summit document. And if that didn't happen, then the future of the G20 itself would be perilled. And then with President Biden in Delhi, and seeking to reinforce further ties with India, could cause embarrassment to Prime Minister Modi and to India, that despite his presence and the fact that our relations are beginning to be so much closer, actually did not help India at a critical moment, and prevented India from gaining maximum mileage out of something on which they had expended so much capital, so much attention. So I think to that extent, the West has been constructive, the Americans have been constructive. That's one. The other is that Russians have achieved a very considerable diplomatic success. The word Russia is not mentioned at all in the document. And whatever has been said is in terms of general principles. And while indirectly one can say that in some instances Russia is targeted, but the Russians can easily say that these are general principles and they apply to everyone, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But Russia definitely has emerged very successful from this conference diplomatically. China has been in the shadows because Xi Jinping did not come. The Prime Minister of China did not have any visibility, as I can see. But China too has played a constructive role in that sense. But they had no choice. Once Russia is on board, then China's policy is to support Russia. So they have gone along, and some of the objections they raised to Vasudev Kutumban and all those things that Amitabh mentioned, that has appeared in the press. To my mind, it was childish. It was childish. But nevertheless, we were able to get through our ideas and our slogans and what have you, in terms of our thoughts on how the world community should interact with each other, Vasudev Kutumban and all that, that has gone in. That is a third thing. The fourth is that this corridor that has been announced is important potentially. Because, Saudi Arabia and UAE have tremendous plans for economic development, their 2030 vision, which will demand a lot of creation of huge amounts of infrastructure, especially in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia wants to have, and UAE wants to have food corridors with India. They want to have, especially UAE, more ties with India. We have a FTA. So there is tremendous prospect there. And in terms of connectivity, this is an alternative to what China is doing in terms of connecting itself to the Europe and to the rest of the world. In fact, that project has run into trouble because China's relations with the West, especially with the EU, and not especially, but with the EU too, has become much more difficult, and countries are walking out of the 17+1 dialogue that China was holding. Is now going to go off the BRI. So it's a good moment for us in terms of connectivity to develop this alternative connectivity. And finally, I would say, and I'll sum up, that I think the West and G7 are worried that BRICS is gathering steam. And already it's become G11 at the next summit in Russia. It might actually expand further. And here is a group in which there is no Western presence. So their agenda is not influenced by Western thinking and priorities. They want to have a more democratic and equitable world, international order. Whereas in the G20, there is both the G7 plus as well as developing countries, the global South. So this is important for the G7 plus, that they should have inroads into the global South, emerging groups, emerging countries, so that the field is not left clear for Russia and China to develop BRICS as an alternative model to what the West has been actually doing this year. So I think in that sense, they realized what they needed to do in terms of making this a success. And finally, the last word. In fact, they have helped Prime Minister Modi a lot and India a lot in facilitating the issuance of this document. Because it would have otherwise dented a little bit India's prestige, India's capacity to bring everybody together, because our entire policy is based on the fact that we are friends with everyone and we keep doors open with everyone. So in that sense, I think India's position as a player on the international stage has been strengthened by this success.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of conversations that were had on the sidelines of the BRICS summit also in South Africa, which seem to have made a lot of progress towards the declaration. But Andrew K.P. Leung, if I may ask you before I bring in Brahmachalani ji, do you believe there will be a recalibration in approach by the CCP? Because even as there is the joint New Delhi declaration that comes to the fore, there are reports which have been put out in the Nepalese media that there is heightened activity along the LAC by the PLA. So you talk peace and you walk war. Is that going to continue, or do you believe there will be a recalibration on the way China looks at this region and also India?
You don't think that Beijing would link the G20 in their success on the G20 summit with the border disputes? That is extremely childish. But I don't think that this is going to happen. Both leaders, President Xi and Prime Minister Modi, have recently agreed to de-escalate. I don't think that this agreement could be derailed by China's perception of India's success on the G20. I think the two are entirely separate. Now, as far as the perceived challenge to the China's Belt and Road is concerned, I don't think there's any question of alternative. Don't forget, the reality remains that China is the largest trading partner, not India. China is the largest trading partner to 128 countries around the world, well ahead of the United States, let alone India. So this fact is not going to be changed by building a rail and sea link with India and Middle East and Europe. And how much can India trade with Europe or Europe trade with India? That's the main question. I think that the most important thing is that China welcomes this global connectivity, because after all, China embraces globalization, because globalization trade is China's lifeblood. Now, as far as the G20 statement is concerned, I think the most important thing is to implement it. There's a lot of talk about a lot of money involved in building the link. How this is going to be financed is also important, but also the reform of the international lending system, as highlighted earlier, and to which China would definitely play a part. Now, the other implication is that, of course, since the Belt and Road was first invented by China, actually, because there was that obvious lack of infrastructural connectivity. And as of now, 10 years down the line, I think China's Belt and Road is now taking stock of the achievement so far. And I use the word achievement because there is already $1 trillion already invested. And then something like 40 million people around the world have been lifted out of poverty because of China's Belt and Road initiative. Obviously, there are lots of blowback in terms of perceptions of lack of transparency or some countries' indebtedness. I think China's taking the stock all along. So I think the whole process would be constructive for China as well as the rest of the developing world.
Here's the thing, Andrew and Ramaji, please weigh in on this. This economic corridor is a committee of nations. It's not the hegemony of one particular nation and its agenda. And there is no debt trap involved. Brahmachalani, is that the biggest difference? And why do you think this could work and this could hurt China's interests? Because Andrew believes China is not going to get hurt. Connectivity and the world connecting is only going to help because China always has worked towards globalization. Whereas many believe that this is going to hurt China's interests in the long term.
The problem with China's lending is opacity. China is very opaque. In fact, it's pretty predatory in terms of its lending practices. China has become the world's largest sovereign creditor to developing countries. But if you look at its loan contracts, almost every Chinese loan contract issued in the last decade has included a sweeping secrecy clause compelling the borrowing country not to disclose the terms of the loan.
Right.
In fact, some of the contracts even stipulate that even the existence of the loan should not be disclosed. The result is that many African, Asian, and Latin American countries have become ensnared in a debt trap, leaving them highly vulnerable to Chinese pressure to pursue policies that advance Chinese economic and geopolitical interests. So to counter that, one of the outcomes of the G20 has been agreement to expand the lending capacities of multilateral development banks like the World Bank and the IMF. The corridor to the Middle East and Europe from India is another initiative, again designed to counter China's attempt to use its lending to advance its own interests. So overall, I think if you just take the bigger picture in terms of what this summit has delivered, India kept the summit from fracturing over Ukraine. That by itself was a major accomplishment. India led the first ever expansion of the G20, is now G21. And thanks to this 37-page consensus document, which contains a host of promises by G20 member states on the pressing global issues, we finally have a document that is geared toward the future. It's a forward-looking document designed to lay the roadmap on how to deal with global challenges. The real challenge about the challenges that this document mentions is how to translate these pious commitments that are enshrined in this document into practice. Because if you look back at the G20's track record, G20 summits in the past have come up with pious commitments which have largely not been honored by member states. So we have a great forward-looking document from the New Delhi summit, but the real test would be to implement these commitments. That's the reason why Prime Minister Modi has suggested that there should be a virtual summit of the G20 in November, because India hands over the presidency to Brazil on November 30th. So before the handover, Modi has proposed a virtual summit to take stock of how the commitments made in the New Delhi Declaration are being implemented.
True, but Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, the actionables in this, are they realistic? Are they deliverable? We heard Amitabh Kant say that in November there's going to be another virtual session to look at the deliverables before India's chair or India's presidency or tenure comes to an end.
You see, the immediate challenge before us was to have a successful G20 and promote the interests, expectations, concerns of the global South. All the G20 was created by the G7 and it has been dominated by the G7 all this while. It's for the first time that a very decisive push in favor of the global South has been made by India, which will be followed up by Brazil and South Africa. So therefore, the agenda of the global South henceforth will have a major place in G20 discussions. The inclusion of the African Union means the strengthening of the role of the global South. After all, the European Union with 27 member states is a member, an African Union, 55 states come in, then you have a much broader spread in terms of the interests of the West and the interests of the global South and marrying them together. So in that case, in this case, India has put on the table, devised an agenda, put forth ideas which, as it was said earlier, look to the future and will result, hopefully, in having a much more balanced international order in terms of economics and politics. Now, some of the ideas that have been put forth, which are very good in terms of concepts, will take time. Take time to implement, and there will be challenges ahead. So the what we have decided in terms of this corridor through Saudi Arabia, etc., probably get implemented, but it's not for tomorrow. A lot of discussions will lie ahead in terms of the modalities of it and the general implementational problems that we always have. Even in terms of climate change issues and finance and everything, in the current context when the global economy is facing recession, Europe is in trouble, the United States is not doing too well, China also is not doing too well. Where will this money come from? Countries are becoming much more selfish, much more inward oriented, and they're imposing all kinds of restrictions in terms of sharing of technology and everything else. So we have to work in that environment. And then finally, and this is the point that I think is important, that so long as there is a sharp division in the world between US and Europe and China and Russia, multilateralism will not work. Will not work. They can agree on certain things, but the implementation part is going to be very difficult unless there's dialogue and diplomacy and an understanding where the common interests are. But if finance is weaponized, if sanctions, unilateral sanctions are imposed and relations are interfered, relations of third countries are interfered with because of the geopolitics and of certain countries, then we're not going to have that kind of an international atmosphere where we can work together. Finally, in terms of Africa. Finally, in terms of Africa. India has long ties with Africa. China has a very big presence. The United States has begun to pay far more attention to Africa. Europe is losing ground, therefore they want to pay much greater attention to Africa. So everybody is agreed on the importance of Africa, and therefore it went through very quickly and rightly so that Africa will have more say. But it's a slightly delicate point. Now, if India wants to have the leadership of the global South, and what would be the role of the African Union? Because, the South African president has been very active in terms of carving out a leadership role for himself. He went all the way to Russia and Ukraine to try and broker a kind of a solution.
Everybody needs to try, but if the spirit is of healthy competition or collaborative competition or cohesion, then it would work. The larger question is reforms of the UN, UNSC and UN. Will these nations who hold the veto power allow that? And is there enough and more pressure, or perhaps will nations de-link from the erstwhile UN and form something totally different of their own? We'll have to wait and watch. I've run out of time. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time on this Sunday. We'll continue the conversations going forward in the coming week. Thank you very much. Short break. When we come back, Union Minister Nitin Gadkari on the World Biofuel Alliance and what this means for Bharat. Stay with us.
Thank you, Excellencies.
Namaste and Jai Hind. Let's go straight across to somebody who's busy connecting with people if he is not connecting all of Bharat. Union Minister Nitin Gadkari ji. Nitin ji, namaste. मैं आनंद नरसिम्हन बोल रहा हूँ. प्रवास के दौरान आपने समय निकालकर हमसे बात कर रहे हैं. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Thank you very much. Let me first ask you, sir, how have we done as Bharat with the G20 year of presidency? It all culminated with the leadership summit yesterday. Your first...
It's a success story. And it gives us tremendous pride and pleasure to Indians that today the way in which the G20 success story is to be written in the history of the world, I feel that it is to be a great satisfaction, at the same time great achievement for the leadership of Modi ji and for the Bharat government.
Kal sham ko you were there at the Bharat Mandapam. Your impression at the Ratri Bhoj hosted by the President. What was the feedback that you got, sir?
जिन लोगों से मिलने का मौका मिला उन लोगों के प्रति भारत ये सबसे फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी है और इसके प्रति सब लोगों के मन में एक विश्वास दिख रहा था और भारत आगे जाकर विश्व में नेतृत्व दे सकता है. जिस प्रकार से आर्थिक विकास हो रहा है निश्चित रूप से भारत हमारे पूरी दुनिया में एक नई विजन दे सकता है. इस बात का अनुभव उस चर्चा के दरमियान निश्चित रूप से हुआ है.
वर्ल्ड बायोफ्यूल अलायंस इसकी घोषणा हुई और सबने हाथ उठाकर इसमें साथ की बात की है. 19 से ज्यादा देश ऑलरेडी आर टुगेदर इन दिस. हाउ इंपॉर्टेंट इज दिस, सर, एंड हाउ कैन इंडिया शो द वे टू द वर्ल्ड?
देखिए, ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण बात है क्योंकि ब्राजील और इंडिया, ब्राजील ने इसमें शुरुआत की थी और ब्राजील भी G20 देशों में आता है और विशेष रूप से ये जो देश है ये 85% जो बायोफ्यूल तैयार होती है यूज़ करने वाले देश हैं और आने वाले समय में हमने ये प्रधानमंत्री जी ने ये मिशन के रूप में तय किया है कि हम 2070 के पहले कार्बन न्यूट्रल देश बनेंगे और हमारे यहाँ 16 लाख करोड़ का फॉसिल फ्यूल का इंपोर्ट होता है और जिसके कारण वो इकोनॉमिक प्रॉब्लम भी है और पोल्यूशन के हिसाब से भी प्रॉब्लम है. हम नए नए रोड बना रहे हैं. ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री लगातार बढ़ रही है. 12.5 लाख करोड़ साइज हुआ. अब वर्ल्ड में हम तीसरे नंबर पर पहुंच गए हैं और धीरे धीरे हमारा विश्वास है कि हम नंबर 1 पर पहुंचेंगे. पर जैसे ये प्रगति होगी वैसे फॉसिल फ्यूल के कारण पोल्यूशन भी क्रिएट होगा और इसलिए हमने जो निर्णय किया है कि डाइवर्सिफिकेशन ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर टुवर्ड्स एनर्जी एंड पावर सेक्टर, ये हमारे लिए बहुत ही समाधान का विषय है. और मुझे इस बात की खुशी है कि भारत ऐसा देश है जो ऑलरेडी इथेनॉल, मेथेनॉल, बायोडीजल, बायो CNG, बायो LNG, इलेक्ट्रिक और ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन पर काम कर रहा है और मुझे विश्वास है कि हमारे यहाँ का रिसर्च और हमारे यहाँ का इनोवेशन ये निश्चित रूप से एक नॉलेज बैंक के रूप में बाकी देशों के लिए भी बहुत उपयोगी होगा. और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ है कि जो रूरल एग्रीकल्चर और ट्राइबल सेक्टर है, अब ये अन्नदाता नहीं, हमारा किसान ऊर्जादाता बनेगा, विटामिन दाता बना है और इसके साथ साथ सबसे महत्वपूर्ण है कि हमारा किसान अब बायो एविएशन फ्यूल भी उसके इथेनॉल से तैयार होगा और हमारे जो ग्रामीण और एग्रीकल्चर क्षेत्र है उसमें विकास की नया इतिहास लिखा जाएगा. और प्रदूषण के हिसाब से और गांव गरीब मजदूर किसान के हित में ये निर्णय निश्चित रूप से ऐतिहासिक है और मैं 2004 से लगातार इस विषय के पीछे लगातार लगकर काम करते आया हूँ. मुझे सबसे ज़्यादा खुशी हो रही है कि ये जो सक्सेस स्टोरी है ये हमारे भारतीयों के लिए बहुत अभिमान की है.
करीब करीब 20 साल, मेरा अगला प्रश्न वही था कि करीब करीब 20 साल से आप इस पर लगे हैं. आज विश्व इस पर जुड़ रहा है, बट जहां हम 2025 तक E20 पर जाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, वी आर, करेक्ट मी इफ आई एम रॉन्ग सर, अराउंड 11.7% इथेनॉल, वी आर ट्राइंग टू गो टू 20% इथेनॉल. पर ऐसे भी देश हैं जिनको ये चुभेगा, तो वो ये होने देंगे? G20 के ही कुछ देश हैं.
नहीं, देखिए, ये तो ऐसा है कि सब देशों को अब ग्रीन रिवॉल्यूशन की तरफ जाना होगा क्योंकि हमें पोल्यूशन से दुनिया को बचाना है और कार्बन न्यूट्रल की तरफ जाना है. आपने बात जो कही वो सही है कि E20 का हमारा निर्णय पर अभी तक हम लोग अप्रोक्सीमेटली 12% तक पहुंचे हैं, और मुझे विश्वास है कि निश्चित रूप से 20% भी पहुंचेंगे। और उससे भी एक रिवोल्यूशनरी निर्णय हमने किया है, वो है फ्लेक्स इंजन, और हमारी टोयोटो की इनोवा गाड़ी लॉन्च करने का मौका हमको मिला। और ये गाड़ी जो है ये 60% बिजली तैयार कर रही है और 40% बायो इथेनॉल पर चलेगी, यानी 100% इथेनॉल पर चलेगी। एवरेज के हिसाब से देखेंगे तो 25 रुपए लीटर पेट्रोल का भाव है, ऐसा समझकर एवरेज मिलेगा। और ये 100% इथेनॉल की स्टोरी हमारे देश के लिए बहुत ही प्रेरणादायी है। हमारे यहाँ मोलाइसेस से, फिर शुगर केन जूस से इथेनॉल बनता है, उसके बाद कॉर्न, व्हीट, फूड ग्रेन, ब्रोकन राइस, इससे बन रहा है। अब इथेनॉल बाम्बू से बन रहा है। अब इथेनॉल परली से, राइस स्ट्रॉ, पॉपुलरली नोन एज परली। तो हमारा पानीपत में जो प्लांट शुरू हुआ है उसमें से परली से 1 लाख लीटर इथेनॉल, 150 टन बायो बिटुमिन, और अब बायो एविएशन फ्यूल बनेगा। और 2024 तक आने वाले समय में 2% एविएशन फ्यूल में 2% बायो फ्यूल भी आएगी। तो ये एक हवाई जहाज चलेगी, गाड़ियां चलेगी, बसेस चलेगी, ट्रक चलेगी। फिर ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन का हम गंदे पानी से और म्यूनिसिपल ऑर्गेनिक वेस्ट से हाइड्रोजन बनाएंगे। तो एक के पीछे एक जो रिवोल्यूशन हो रहा है, और हिंदुस्तान की IIT, इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज, स्टार्टअप जिस प्रकार से इसमें काम कर रही है। अभी हमने लिथियम आयन बैटरी के बारे में अच्छा काम किया, इसके बाद में सोडियम आयन, जिंक आयन, सभी इसमें एल्यूमिनियम आयन में काम किया, एल्यूमिनियम एयर टेक्नोलॉजी में काम किया है। तो मुझे लगता है आने वाले हमारे युग में हमारा ट्रांसपोर्ट सेक्टर फॉसिल फ्यूल से धीरे धीरे मुक्त होगा, और ये बहुत बड़ी बात होगी। 16 लाख करोड़ देश का इंपोर्ट बचेगा, ये तो महत्वपूर्ण है, पर देश प्रदूषण से बचेगा और हमारे स्वास्थ्य में सुधार होगा, और बहुत बड़ा कार्बन न्यूट्रल की तरफ हम जो जा रहे हैं, जो हमारे प्रधानमंत्री का उद्देश्य है, उसमें हमको सक्सेस मिलेगा।
कहीं आपको लगता है कि दुनिया में देयर विल बी ओपननेस टू एक्सेप्टिंग दिस, बिकॉज दिस इज आल्सो गोइंग टू हेल्प अ लॉट ऑफ द इमर्जिंग नेशंस मीट SDG गोल्स? तो देश के अंदर खपन के साथ साथ क्या हम इसको आयात भी कर पाएंगे?
देखिए, आत्मनिर्भर भारत बनना ही हमारा अधिकार है। हम कोई किसी राष्ट्र के विरोध में नहीं है, उल्टा हमारे पास की टेक्नोलॉजी लेकर वो भी अपने यहाँ प्रदूषण से मुक्ति पा सकते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है दुनिया इसका समर्थन करेगी और सब लोग इसका स्वागत ही करेंगे। और वर्ल्ड में जो G20 के देशों ने जो इस प्रकार से हमारे आपस में जो एक नया जो मसूदा तैयार हुआ है कोऑपरेशन का, वो देखते हुए मुझे लगता है दुनिया में इसका स्वागत ही होगा, और निश्चित रूप से अभिनंदन भी होगा। और ये मानवता के लिए और मानव समाज के लिए ये बहुत उपयोगी होगा, क्योंकि प्रदूषण के कितने दुष्परिणाम हैं हम लोग जानते हैं। दिल्ली जैसे शहर में प्रदूषण के कारण कितनी समस्या हुई आरोग्य की, इसका भी सब लोगों ने अनुभव किया है।
Is there a change in perception towards Bharat, Nitin ji, because you've interacted with the world leaders? आप कितने सालों से आप देश विदेश भी जा रहे हैं, G20 के पटल पर आपको लगा कि एक चेंज है एटीट्यूड में भारत की तरफ, नजरिया बदला है?
तो इम्पोर्टेंट चीज है, एक नॉलेज टू वेल्थ, इनोवेशन, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, साइंस, टेक्नोलॉजी, रिसर्च, स्किल एंड सक्सेसफुल प्रैक्टिसेस, वी नेम इट एज नॉलेज एंड कन्वर्शन ऑफ नॉलेज इनटू वेल्थ। ये भारत का मुख्य रूप रहा है, और इसमें जो हम लोग नॉलेज हासिल कर रहे हैं, वर्ल्ड में हमारे सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर पूरे दुनिया में बहुत ही डंके की चोट पर सब जगह रिकॉग्नाइज है। हमारे डॉक्टर अमेरिका और यूरोप में 10 में से 4 से 5 डॉक्टर भारतीय है। हमारे इंजीनियर्स, हमारे डॉक्टर्स, हमारे के रिसर्च, हमारे यहाँ का स्टार्टअप, और हमारे यहाँ की जो ग्रोथ बढ़ रही है, वी आर द फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी इन द वर्ल्ड। और जो टेक्नोलॉजी और साइंस, विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में हम लोग लगातार प्रगति और विकास कर रहे हैं, इन सब बातों का मुझे लगता है कि निश्चित रूप से परिणाम होगा। और हमारी संस्कृति ये कहती है कि विश्व का कल्याण हो, तो हमारे पास जो रिसर्च अच्छा होगा, हमारे पास जो प्रदूषण से मुक्ति मिलाने का जो मार्ग होगा, वो पूरा मार्ग हम लोग पूरे दुनिया को देने का शेयर करेंगे। और वो स्वाभाविक रूप से ये जो रिजोल्यूशन हुआ है उसमें नॉलेज बैंक के रूप में हम काम करेंगे, और निश्चित रूप में इसका फायदा मानवता को होगा, पूरे विश्व को होगा, और ये मुझे लगता है कि एक बहुत बड़ा रिवोल्यूशन होगा।
विश्व पटल पर हम अब अपने आप को भारत कह रहे हैं, आपकी?
हाँ, निश्चित कह रहे हैं, क्योंकि भारत ये हमारी संस्कृति के साथ जुड़ा हुआ नाम है, और हम भारत कह रहे, गौरवान्वित हो रहे, और दुनिया भी हमको भारत करके रिकॉग्नाइज कर रही है, ये भी खुशी की बात है।
देश में कुछ लोग सनातन को इरेडिकेट करने की बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हमने G20 में देखा कि हमारी संस्कृति और सनातन प्रथा कूट कूट कर दिखी है। बाहर ही 28 फुट का नटराज अष्टधातु से बना हुआ। क्या इसको
देखिए, पूरे विश्व में हमारी संस्कृति, इतिहास और विरासत से निश्चित प्रमाण में एक बड़ा आकर्षण है, चाहे वो योग विज्ञान का हो, चाहे आयुर्वेद का हो। और धर्म का मतलब किसी रिलीजन के साथ नहीं होता, कर्तव्य के साथ होता है। कोई शिक्षक जब कहता है कि मैं शिक्षक धर्म का पालन कर रहा हूँ, कोई पत्रकार बोलता है मैं पत्रकार धर्म का पालन कर रहा हूँ, इसका अर्थ होता है वो उसके कर्तव्यों का पालन कर रहा है। और ये वे ऑफ लाइफ है। हिंदू धर्म और हिंदुत्व की जो पद्धति है, जिसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जजमेंट आया हुआ है, इट इज ए वे ऑफ लाइफ। दुर्भाग्यवश जिनको इस बात में कोई जानकारी नहीं है, जो समझ नहीं पाए, वो गलत फहमी के कारण कुछ ऐसी बातें करते हैं। पर मुझे लगता है कि भारतीय संस्कृति विश्व के आकर्षण का केंद्र है और निश्चित रूप से हमारी बातों को हम दुनिया को समझा सकेंगे, ये मेरा विश्वास है।
मेरा अंतिम प्रश्न है नितिन जी, मैं जानता हूं आपके पास समय अल्प है। माय फाइनल क्वेश्चन टू यू ऑन दिस कॉन्वर्सेशन इज दीज डेमोक्रेटाइजेशन ऑफ G20, इसको देश भर में लेकर जाना 60 से ज्यादा शहरों में, इससे क्या फर्क पड़ा है? डू यू थिंक देयर इज अ चेंज इन द वे द वर्ल्ड इज लुकिंग एट भारत और अंडरस्टैंडिंग भारत? माय फाइनल क्वेश्चन सर।
देखिए, सबसे पहली और महत्वपूर्ण बात है कि साल भर ये G20 के जो प्रोग्राम हुए अलग अलग 60 शहरों में, इसके कारण जनता को भी पहली बार ये पता चला है कि इसके पीछे क्या भाव है। ये पता चला कि भारत की संस्कृति, इतिहास, विरासत और उसके साथ हमारा विज्ञान, हमारा तंत्र विज्ञान और भारतीय समाज एक प्रगतिशील, समृद्ध, संपन्न, सुसंस्कृत और शिक्षित समाज है। तो स्वाभाविक रूप से हमें भी दुनिया का परिचय हुआ और हमारे विचारों का भी परिचय दुनिया को होने का मौका मिला। और मुझे लगता है एक तरफ से फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी के रूप में आज भारत को दुनिया जानती है, तो निश्चित रूप से इन सब बातों का परिणाम भारत के लिए बहुत अच्छा होगा। विश्व में भारत का स्थान अव्वल होगा और प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में हमें जो सक्सेस स्टोरी मिली है, ये निश्चित रूप से बहुत गौरवान्वित करने वाली है और ऐसा मुझे लगता है।
देश को तो आपने जोड़ दिया सड़कें बनाकर, अब इंडिया को यूरोपियन यूनियन से जोड़ने का जो इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर है, वो आपका अगला प्रोजेक्ट तो नहीं है?
अभी जिस प्रकार से ये प्रस्ताव तैयार हुआ है, तो कल ही फॉरेन मिनिस्टर ने मुझे बताया, तो निश्चित रूप से जैसा आदेश सरकार करेगी, प्रधानमंत्री करेंगे, हम कोई भी कठिन से कठिन काम होगा वो पूरा करके दिखाएंगे, यही विश्वास के साथ मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूँ।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। तो उस पर कॉन्फर्मेशन की हम उम्मीद करेंगे, वेट करेंगे कि कब आप हमें बताते हैं। थैंक यू सो मच फॉर योर टाइम सर।
नमस्कार।
हमेशा आपसे बात करके अच्छा लगता है। थैंक यू सर। नमस्ते।
थैंक यू।
G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं। वन अर्थ